Autistic black kid 5, the N-word at a playground.
Did you call him a child? Did you call the child the word? It is my own business. You call him an Okay, why don't you have the boss to say it right now again?
Where is it a greater crime for a white person to say a word than for a black person to kill a white person?
I don't think it's appropriate in any reason to berate a child, to use any type of expletives towards a child, let alone a racial slur. Welcome to the John Amanchukwu Show. Thank you so much for tuning in. Do me a big favor and subscribe to my YouTube channel. Now, in this episode, I want to talk about a viral incident that took place about, I think it was last week, with a white woman by the name of Shiloh Hendricks, who was confronted by a Somalian gentleman in reference to her calling a young black boy the N-word, and you know what that word is. Now, by the images that you will see, one can argue whether or not the kid is 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, or possibly even 10. We don't know the exact age of this child. And it's kind of odd as well, I'll say this in the beginning, that the parents of this child haven't surfaced. Now, Shiloh has a Give, Send, Go account that's set up where she's raising funds. And Give, Send, Go is a platform where, you know, if you get kicked off of GoFundMe, you can go to Give, Send, Go, and they are kind of fair, I would say that, when it comes to their policies. And guess what? I'm not going to rail against that, because if I ever needed a platform to raise funds with all of the things that I'm doing around this country, I can look to Give, Send, Go. And so they didn't cancel the Carmelo Anthony Give, Send, Go campaign. They didn't cancel the one, I believe, for Daniel Penny and for Cal Rittenhouse, and they're not canceling this one also. And so they have positioned themselves to be a fair platform. Regardless of what you think about the issues or what's happening, they have been consistent in their policies. And hats off to them for that. But regardless of if this kid is 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and 10, I don't think it's appropriate in any reason to berate a child, to use any type of expletives towards a child, let alone a racial slur. So I want to show you this initial video of what happened. Then I want to get to the Matt Walsh video where he's discussing this situation. Watch.
Autistic black kid 5, the N-word at a playground.
Did you call him a child? Did you call the child the word? It is my own business. You call him an Okay, why don't you have the boss to say it right now again?
You
Okay. All right, that's what you say.
You don't go digging through people's
Nobody dig into your shit.
A little kid just did. You
That little kid, you call him a
Yeah.
The little child?
What if he acts like one? He's gonna.
Are you about to hit him? You chase him here?
He took my son's stuff.
So that gives you the right to call the child 5-year-old the N-word.
If that's what he's gonna act.
That's
like.
what you're
Hold it
gonna
right
call
there.
him.
You see the back and forth between the gentleman who's holding the camera. Now, it has been reported that he's a pedophile. However, that case was dismissed against him. And so there's a lot of people who need to update their information on that topic. He is not a registered pedophile and or sex offender. And so that is a critical point that we need to point out. However, if he was, then the big question is, what is he doing at a park in the first place? Now, it is reported that he does have children. He doesn't show his children on the camera in this big fiasco. And so that's that. We don't have any additional details to really drive into that, but that is what's taking place there. And so the camera briefly panned over to the young boy, who, if you asked me, you know, I have an 8-year-old. He probably looks the height of my youngest son, who is 8, okay? But you see the back and forth between Shiloh and the Somalian individual. I mean, she's cranked up. You know, she's flipping the bird. She's saying the N-word several times to this gentleman. And there we have it, ladies and gentlemen. Watch.
That's what he's gonna act like.
You know, that's a hate speech. And you can be recorded for that.
I don't give a shit.
Okay, we'll see about that, what the internet has to say about you.
The fact checker identified her as Shiloh Hendricks, 36, from Rochester, Minnesota, who is unemployed after.
All right, so here we go. That is what took place last week, I believe. And this video has made its rounds. It's ruffled feathers. It's dividing America. I am also starting to witness that, man, I hate to say it, but I've addressed the woke race baiters and race hustlers on the left for a number of years. In particular, many of these individuals have not only been white, but black. Men like Reverend Al Sharpton and Jesse Jackson and several others, you know, Roland Martin, you know, the list goes on and on and on. And I have called these people out. Why? Because they are not trying to get us to a position of harmony or even racial reconciliation. These people are more geared towards being divisive. And so I am against that. I think we need to find ways to unite America. America is not a perfect country. We did have a rocky founding with the history of slavery, then even on to the Jim Crow laws that were pushed and enacted primarily by white liberals in our country. However, I have done the hard, arduous work of even speaking against people who look like me. And I have suffered personal injury for this as well. You know, I've been called everything but a child of God, an Uncle Tom, even a white supremacist. I have been told that I'm the white man's puppet. I'm tap dancing for the white man. I'm doing all this stuff. I have heard it all. And why do I speak truth to people who look like me? Because it's the truth. Color can be removed from the context and the situation. I can care less about the color. The question is it truthful? So if it's truthful, I'm going to say it. And so I wanted to do this episode because I'm starting to hear some rhetoric and some speech that sounds like the same woke tactics that we've seen on the left. Whether we want to call these people a part of the woke right or not, you be the judge. But I am not for positioning individuals in a manner where we celebrate their rhetoric and their speech when, if it was coming from the mouth of someone who was a black liberal, we would say, nah, I can't rock with that. I can't get with that. They're race baiting, they're grifting, they're race hustling, all of that stuff. And so I'm consistent. I even authored a book about critical race theory. And you remember during the summer of love in 2021 and 2020 and all that good stuff with the George Floyd issue. From there, all the CRT stuff went crazy in the public school system, racial consciousness, all of that stuff. I fought against it to my own harm at times. I lost a lot of friends. I lost a lot of supporters, but I gained new friends and supporters as well. However, I spoke against it. Now, I would be a hypocrite if I were to see similar things take place amongst conservatives and not say anything about it. Now, I can't be that person. I can't do it. You know what I mean? It's not worth it. I just want to be balanced. I want to be fair. I am not about lifting up the quote unquote conservative truth to really just bludgeon the liberal untruths and see the untruths in the Democrat Party and can speak to that. But when I see untruth amongst conservatives, my lips are sealed and I can say nothing. No, I'm not signing up for that. I'm just going to be gonna just keep it 100 for the lack of better words. And I'm going to say what needs to be said because I don't believe that truth has a skin tone or a color. You know, I believe that absolute truth comes from the Word of God, and I'm going to reference some passages of Scripture in a little bit. But I want to show you some sentiments that Matt Walsh has as relates to this issue, and he also brings into play the Carmelo Anthony and Austin Metcalf issue as well. Watch.
The mob that tried unsuccessfully to cancel Shiloh Hendricks was far more outraged over Shiloh saying the N-word than they were over Carmelo Anthony stabbing somebody to death. Indeed, many of them actively supported Carmelo Anthony murdering Austin Metcalf. They rewarded him financially for it. And this is all part of the preposterous racial double standard that has defined American culture for generations now. It is a double standard.
All right, let's hold it there.
That declares.
So he's talking about people who supported Carmelo Anthony after he got into the debacle with Austin Metcalf, and we haven't seen the final footage yet. I have my opinions about it. However, I do want to see the footage. It's going to require Carmelo Anthony being able to build a strong case of self-defense for him to get off in this particular case. We don't know all of the details. I'm waiting to see the footage. I want to see the footage, but we don't have those details at the current time. However, what Matt is referencing here is that, yes, people gave money towards a murderer, Carmelo Anthony, okay, and that he killed Austin Metcalf. And people are now giving money towards Shiloh Hendricks. Now, there are many people who supported Kyle Rittenhouse and the funding that he received, okay, when he went through his situation in Kenosha, which I support. Kyle Rittenhouse. I thought that he did the right thing in defending himself, but there are some people who would say, no, he shouldn't have been there, and that he's a murderer himself for taking someone's life, and they're angry even today for him being able to fundraise and raise money. Some people feel the same way about Daniel Penny, although I believe that Daniel Penny did the right thing. He was a hero that day. But there's another crowd that says, no, Daniel Penny shouldn't have been able to raise a penny, and it's racist that he took the life of a black guy who was saying that he was prepared to even die that day, who was acting rather psychotic on a subway. So on and so forth. We've seen these issues before, and generally what happens is people pick a side. And when they pick a side, they either pray for that individual or they send in money. Now, I'll be the first to tell you that I haven't supported any of these campaigns. I didn't send a penny to Kyle Rittenhouse. I didn't send a penny to Daniel Penny. I didn't send any money into Carmelo Anthony as well. I'm not going to do so. I didn't send any money to support Shiloh Hendricks. And strangely, we haven't seen a GoFundMe or a Give, Send, Go account for the 5-year-old autistic young boy who was called the N-word at the playground by Shiloh. Now, that sticks out to me because in that case, one could say that shouldn't he have the same right to be able to, quote unquote, reward himself and or his family for, let's say, the mental anguish that he has to go through now as a result of being, verbally attacked by Shiloh Hendricks. Now, let's make this plain from the beginning and from the onset that they both were wrong. The young man was wrong from rummaging for rummaging through her bag and seeking to steal, I believe it was a juice box or something like that. And she's wrong also as an adult for calling him the N-word. All right. And so I want to address those double standards because to Matt, it might be a double standard. But to others, they may be saying, no, there's no double standard. This is what y'all did in that situation. This is what we're doing in this situation. Watch.
Declares it a greater crime for a white person to say a word than for a black person to kill a white person. In fact, killing a white person could even be a just punishment for saying that word, according to these standards.
All right. Now, I don't think that it's a greater crime. at all. I personally don't. I don't know who he's referencing. I don't know who he's talking about. But I don't think that it's a greater crime. I'm sure that Austin Metcalf's family would much rather him be called a name and Carmelo Anthony the same thing and no one be unalived, But the situation of Carmelo Anthony and what took place that day, man, is a sad case. I made it plain when I preached a sermon in Fort Worth, Texas. Number one, I said that you should not bring a weapon to a track meet, okay? From what I know, and I don't claim to be an attorney, I don't claim to be a lawyer, but you're not supposed to bring weapons, especially knives, on school property. You shouldn't use it. I also stated in a sermon that I preached in Fort Worth, Texas, that, hey, if someone tells you to leave their tent, then you should get up from the tent and leave, regardless of whether they say it in a nice way or an abrasive way. Whether they tell you, hey, my man, you need to leave, or they tell you, bleep, 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 get up, right? Either way, if you're not supposed to be there, you should move, okay? And then I also referenced the fact that if you run into a situation, because I have 3 children and I've spent a lot of time as a youth pastor, and I want to speak to this current generation, all colors and shades, but also to young black men in this situation, to teach them how to diffuse situations and to handle things. I also mentioned that, hey, if you run into a situation where you want someone to move from where they're sitting and they're not in the right place, you might want to go find law enforcement or a coach, but you don't want to take it upon yourself to attempt to physically move that person. So that's what I said when I preached a sermon on loving your neighbor as yourself. I want to give practical, biblical, and sound wisdom and advice to our up and coming generation so that we can quell many of these issues that may take place. But you have to be neutral. You can't lean in a particular direction. I'm not trying to, quote unquote, practice tribalism. I don't want to be in a position where I'm only upholding the viewpoints of black people. I don't want to be in a position where I'm only upholding the viewpoints of white people or conservatives or liberals. No, man. At the end of the day, yes, you already know I voted for President Donald J. Trump. You already know where I stand politically on conservative policies versus liberal policies. But there's also something greater than that, all right? I am a Christian. I'm a believer. And I believe that the litmus test for what is right and what is wrong should begin and stop with the Word of God. And shouldn't you expect that same type of mindset from every Christian who professes to be a believer? Watch.
The rules surrounding this word, the moral weight granted to it, the arbitrary guidelines drawn around it, it's all nonsense. It's all indefensible on both moral and intellectual grounds. People are fed up with it. That's what you're seeing in this story. People are just fed up with it. Now, that child, if he's like the average black...
Here it is. Matt says that people are fed up with it. That's what you're seeing in this story. People are fed up with it. Yeah, Matt, people are fed up with it. But the same argument can be made for people who might be black liberals. They're fed up with it. White liberals are fed up with it. Conservatives are fed up with it. Black and white. I'm fed up with it. And so it behooves us to judge these issues case by case so that we don't paint with a broad brush. Critical race theory purported that whites were inherently racist. In other words, they were irredeemable of their racism, not because of the actions that they have committed, but because of the pigmentation of their skin. I fought against that because I do believe that a person can get born again and that they can choose to be racist. You know, I believe that racism is not a skin tone or a color. Racism doesn't equal white, nor does racism equal black, but racism is sin. And all have sinned and come short of the glory of God. I fought against that, all right? And I did so because it's the right thing to do. There are blacks in this country who still live, who are still alive, who recall the harsh treatment that they endured through Jim Crow. No one's alive today that witnessed slavery, but there are people alive today who went through Jim Crow. I have a good friend by the name of Clarence Henderson, who was a part of one of the sit-ins in North Carolina. Prominent leader, a solid black Christian conservative. I believe it was the Woolworth sit-in that he was a part of. And so he doesn't have an animus towards all whites because of what some whites did in defrauding him and not allowing him to eat at a countertop. What if he had taken the position that I'm fed up now and I'm angry, so now I should go around and call all white people that I see an expletive, curse them out, or use some type of racial slur against all white people because of what happened to me when I was a young man trying to eat at a countertop because of Jim Crow laws. See, you have language, and then you have laws. It was a part of the legal laws. It was a part of the legal system for these things to be allowed. But there are many blacks who were able to look past that because we recognize that everyone should have a chance to be judged by what, as we always say, not by the color of their skin, but by the content of their character. That's what I've seen. That's what I know to be true. But some could have taken the position that we're fed up with it. And no, we're going to keep calloused and hard hearts towards whites because of something that their ancestors did. That's not good. And what Shiloh Hendricks did in that she called a 5-year-old, 6-year-old, 7-year-old, 8-year-old, 9-year-old, 10-year-old child, however old you want to say that he is, the N-word as a result of an encounter with him going through her bag. You know, I would have been okay if she would have told him, man, get your hands out of here, you little thief. Or you foolish little boy, what are you doing? Or you silly little boy, something like that. I would have been okay if she would have called him and popped his hand, get your hand out of my bag. But why did she have to call him the N-word? Why did she have to go there? Why was that the first thing that she could muster up and say? There's a problem with that. That's a heart issue. My heart is right. Shiloh's isn't. And for anyone to seek to defend that at great lengths, it could be that you might have a smudge on your lens. Watch.
Child in this country did not hear the N-word for the first time from a white woman at the park last week. Okay? He's no doubt heard it thousands of times. He likely hears it every day. He probably hears it in his own home. Are we supposed to believe that he's heard the word 1,000 times, but it's time 1,001 that really traumatized him? I mean, the idea that the word is a common greeting for one race, but unspeakably evil if uttered by a different race, is laughably ridiculous. The idea that one race can say the word 10,000 times a day and the other race cannot speak the syllables under any circumstance, even if they're just repeating what someone else said or singing along to a rap song, that idea, again, is totally indefensible, which is why no one has ever tried to defend it. Instead, it's just yet another, racial rule of the road that we're supposed to follow without ever asking any questions about it or expecting anyone to explain it or justify it. People are sick of that. It's just that simple. They are sick of it.
All right. So here Matt appears to be arguing for the privilege of being able to use the N-word because rappers use it in their songs. And because black people probably say it 1,000 times, as he said that this young man has possibly heard it. So therefore, you should have the right to use that same term that many blacks took and removed the teeth, the teeth and or the bite from it. It was intended to demonize and bludgeon blacks, but many found ways to use it as a term of endearment. Blacks did that, not the people who called them those terms or those words. But this is something that blacks did amongst ourselves. Now, it is true that, hey, if it's in a rap song and you want me to sing along with your lyrics, don't be shocked if when we get to the part where y'all drop the N-word possibly 10 times in the song, that a white person says it. Don't be shocked, okay? All right, I can follow that train of thought, because if it's in the lyrics and you want me to buy your music, I think you want me to rap your lyrics as well, okay? But in this situation, whether Shiloh called this boy the N-word or any other term, that's not considered a racial slur. But if she called him the A word, the B word, the D word, F word, anything like that, it's inappropriate under all circumstances, whether it's the N word or not. Why? Because we're talking about a child here. And this is what I had to say about the situation on X. I said, I wouldn't call a white child prior to getting saved, let alone where I am now in my walk with the Lord, the A word, the B word, or the F word under any circumstances, especially for taking a juice box from my bag, which has actually happened before. I once gave a white kid a juice box and crackers after rummaging through my bag at a pool because I figured he was hungry, point blank. The young boy was going through a bag looking for food. Is he wrong? Yes. I ran into the same situation at the pool. A young white child was going through our belongings. I suspected that he was hungry. So what did I do? I gave him the item that he wanted, and I added something to it because I figured that he was hungry. Now, that's probably more of a Christian way to address this issue. That's not a secular way of addressing it. You know, in a secular world, one would shut up their bowels of compassion, the Bible says, and tell that person, man, get on and end this, or whatever race they are, use a racial slur to drive that person away because you're angry because you caught them in your bag. There are many ways to deal with it. On that day at the pool, I could have traumatized that child by saying some damaging things to him. I could have, but I chose not to. Number one, because I've been made over by Christ, and my heart harbors no resentment towards any child, let alone a young white kid who's hungry. And I don't want to demean myself to the point where I become classless and I'm now cursing out a kid over a $2 or $1 possibly juice box. No, that's not my style. And for any person who defends someone doing that, man, like I said, that's a heart problem. I also said, why wouldn't I curse out a kid? It would be inappropriate. It would show a grave lack of self-control on my part as an adult, which is indicative of the fact that Shiloh began to use that type of rhetoric when addressing a kid. 1 Corinthians chapter 13, verse 11 says this in the NIV version. It says, when I was a child, I talked like a child. I thought like a child. I reasoned like a child. When I became a man, I put the ways of childhood behind me. All right. At some point, you have to mature. At some point, you have to grow past your youthful inhibitions and things that you would do in your youth to grow up to a point where you are able to handle crucial conversations and crucial conflict. Witnessing adults tie themselves into pretzels like Matt Walsh while grasping for straws in an attempt to justify and explain away the psychotic behavior of Shiloh Hendricks is laughable. Matt, all you had to say was the kid was wrong for stealing. And Shiloh was wrong for calling him a racial slur, let alone if she called him any other expletive, the A word, the B word, or the F word. Just say that. Just say both of them were wrong. The additional commentary about Carmelo Anthony, about whites being sick of it, all of that stuff, yeah, you can include that. But if we want to be geared towards reconciliation and uniting our country, your choice of words is not going to get us in that position. After the death of George Floyd and even after the death of Ahmaud Arbery, I could have used some rhetoric and some inflammatory words and talking points that would have stirred up more strife in America amongst that situation. But I chose not to, because my intent is not to be like the race hustlers. It's not to be like the race baiters. My intent is to get us to the place where we can come to the realization that although our pigmentation is different, we're united by Christ. He has made us one blood. Instead, I chose to take the classy route, to take the high road, and to find strategic ways to unite people rather than pouring gasoline on the situation. Matt, as a Christian, you could have chosen a different way of addressing that situation. That's my theory. I also said this on X. I've fought for years against black race baiters and race hustlers. I've called them out at every juncture. I have. Lord knows I have. I have endless amounts of emails and messages from black people upset with me, like I can't come to the cookout. You just a black man thinking that you're a white man and those white people are going to use you and blah, 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 blah. I have dealt with it all. And why did I call out the race baiters and the race hustlers? Because strife begets strife. Division begets division. And evil begets evil. If I am going to be my brother's keeper and or my brother's brother, if I'm going to be that, then I must be skillful in uniting people, especially around the topic of racism. That's a sensitive topic for many people. Many people harbor resentments. I've seen this both amongst blacks, and I've seen this also amongst whites. I even seen it amongst Indians and Hispanics. Sometimes people can be racist against people who don't look like them and even people who look like them, depending on the shade and color. You know, in India, they have a caste system, just it's sad. I also said this. I wish more prominent white conservative voices like Matt Walsh, whom I respect and generally does solid commentary, I wish he would take my lead and not become what you once loathed. The black kid was wrong for stealing, and Shiloh was wrong for what she said. Let's just say that she didn't say the N word and she said the B word or the A word or the F word. Is she wrong? Is she wrong? Would it be wrong for her to call that child a MFer? Would she be wrong in doing so? You can't tell me as a Christian that no, she's justified because she's angry. She's wrong. If your Christianity puts you in a position where you can't speak truth solely because of the age of the individual, the skin tone of the individual, or the political party of the individual, I question whether or not that individual may even know Christ. You know, God did say that many people are going to get to heaven, and they're going to talk about the great and swelling things that they've done. And he's going to tell them to depart from me, you workers of iniquity. I never knew you. I do think that iniquity and racism are things that are going to get people shunned from the kingdom of heaven. I do believe that. In closing, this is what I said. What if we're all being duped? What if this is a big gotcha scam conjured up by Shiloh and the Somalian who filmed her? Something is missing. Is this another Jussie Smollett? Something is missing. Where are the parents of this black kid? Where are they? Where is their GoFundMe and GiveSendGo account? How come they are not profiting off of this issue? Where are they? Do you mean to tell me that this kid doesn't have any parents? Not even foster parents? Grandparents? Someone? You mean to tell me that for some reason or another, everyone connected to this kid is silent, but the only person who stood up for him was a guy who was once going through a case where he was labeled as a pedophile but was ultimately dismissed? Am I to believe that? 1 Peter 5:8 says this in the NIV version. It says, be alert and of sober mind. Your enemy, the devil, prowls around like a roaring lion looking for someone to devour. John 8:44 in the NIV version says, you belong to your father, the devil, and you want to carry out your father's desires. He was a murderer from the beginning, not holding to the truth, for there is no truth in him. When he lies, he speaks his native language, for he is a liar and the father of lies. You know, there are more details that will possibly come out with this situation. Shiloh Hendricks and the young, unnamed and unknown black kid that she called the N-word. Yeah, more truth, more information at some point will come out. Maybe this is just Jussie Smollett 2.0 or 3.0. We've seen some other bad actors try to do the same thing. But what it has done, it has revealed the prejudice and the bias and the animus and the emotions that have been conjured up in the hearts of many people. Now, we expect that to take place in situations like this amongst those who don't name the name of Christ. A more secular response is what, one would think that Matt Walsh gave. He didn't give a more Christian and or biblical response. He gave this response that suits the flesh. And that's easy to do. It's natural to do, but it's not God's design plan. The Bible does say this about people being right in their own eyes. Proverbs 21 verse 2 says, every way of a man is right in his own eyes, but the Lord weighs the heart. God knows the heart of Matt Walsh. God knows my heart. He knows the heart of Shiloh, and he knows the heart of that young kid. He also knows the heart of the Somalian who filmed everything. He knows. Proverbs 14:12 says, there is a way that seems right to a man, but its end is the way of death. Proverbs 12:15 says, the way of a fool is right in his own eyes, but a wise man listens to advice. Judges 21:25 says, in those days there was no king in Israel. Everyone did what was right in his own eyes. Isaiah 5:21 says, woe to those who are wise in their own eyes and shrewd in their own sight. Proverbs 3:7 says this in my closing. It says, be not wise in your own eyes. Fear the Lord and turn away from evil. What does this mean? It means that it takes us being transformed by the renewing of our mind, according to Romans 12:2, for us to see right. You can't see right. A man can't see what is just and what is true and what is wholesome. Can't see error properly until you've been transformed by the renewing of your mind. That will impact your sight. There are people who will use this situation as a tool to drive in financial support, prove a point, or ultimately try to create some kind of race war. That's not me. That's not me in 2025. And that wasn't me after the death of George Floyd. It wasn't me after the death of Trayvon Martin, Michael Brown, Breonna Taylor, and the list goes on and on. No, I'm not seeking to divide America. I want to unite America. But uniting America also means that when it's someone like Matt Walsh, who, for the most part, says things that I agree with all of the time, supports the same president that I support, President Donald J. Trump. It does mean that when I see an area where that doesn't fit, that I should be able to point that out, void of what many might say as it relates to me doing so. Why? Because I'm a preacher. I'm a Christian. And the Bible says that the lips of the priest should keep wisdom. That's why. And you should expect the same thing of your pastor, your preacher, and any preacher or Christian. You should. If you don't, it's because you have reduced the standard of the truth to tribalism and what's right to your own, which is unbiblical. All right, that's enough. Let me know what you think below in the comment section. Am I right or am I wrong? Am I weak or am I strong? God bless you and God bless America.